Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of Placing Faces, the show where we sit down with some of the most influential casting directors in all of Hollywood and across the entertainment spectrum. I'm your host, Charlie Chappell, and today we sit down with casting director, producer, and actor's biggest fan, Robert Ulrich. Robert is known in a way not many casting directors get to be, in front of the camera, thanks to his appearances on 2 seasons of the Glee Project. But his behind-the-camera work means that he's a name you've probably seen if you watch the credit scroll. He's cast shows like Glee, Battlestar Galactica, Supernatural, American Horror Story, The Exorcist, The Mentalist, and he's just made his first foray into producing with 2017's Billy Boy, which we got to talk to him about as well. We got a chance to chat with him at his office in the San Fernando Valley, where he has an obviously busy and yet still incredibly welcoming staff, and where he has a hopeful future casting director shadowing him to learn the process of day-to-day in the industry. There seems to be a kind of paternal nature to the way he approaches those he works with, a guiding but direct tone with his staff, kind deeds, taking care of those in need, all mirrored by a pride I saw on his face from recent forays working with his actual son, cinematographer and producer, Cooper Ulrich. Robert's voice comes and goes, an unfortunate side effect of prolonged laryngitis that he is working on recovering from. That being said, he was extremely generous and a pleasure to talk to, so I hope that you learn as much as I did. We're going to just jump right into it. I want to talk to you first about something that isn't directly your casting, although you did cast it, is your most recent movie that just came out, Billy Boy.
Cool.
I gave it a watch.
You did? You watched it?
I did. It was on Amazon. I really, really enjoyed it. I think that it was a different kind of storytelling, a different way of telling a story. I was surprised that Blake Jenner wrote it. I thought he did an incredible job with the story. Melissa Benoist was phenomenal. She always is. I really, really love her work. But what was really interesting to me, and this came from a conversation I had with Banks, is that your son also produced on this.
Yeah, he did.
And you got to work with your boy.
That was wonderful, yeah.
How was that experience?
Well, it was incredible. He not only produced it, he shot part of it.
Okay.
Let me tell you.
Because he's a DP, right?
He's a DP.
Yeah.
I have chronic laryngitis, so I actually am having a bad vocal day today. But my son, Blake, his brother, my son, and Bradley Beaker, the director, the 5 of us produced it. My son ended up doing the reshoots because the cinematographer Joaquin Cedillo was unavailable for the day we did reshoots. We did reshoots over a year later, almost 2 years later. We screened the movie forever. We suddenly realized that one of the actors, Grant Harvey, who was a pivotal part of the movie, Mikey.
Yeah.
He wasn't in the movie originally when it was in a linear version. He wasn't in the movie for 40 minutes, and people missed him. So we made a big decision to go back and do a day of reshoots. My son shot that day, and I think some of his scenes are some of the most beautiful in the movie. He's extremely talented DP, extremely talented, and heading to Ireland to shoot something right now. And then about a year later, we decided to open the movie up, and my son did all the second unit stuff in the movie too. So, yeah, the movie was awesome. I cast Glee, and then I was on a show called the Glee Project for Oxygen and Fox, and it was a reality competition show in which people from all over the world competed. Over the 2 seasons, I saw 100,000 people. The first season, 12 people participated. The second season, there were 14 contenders. And Blake Jenner won that second season. We became friends. He came to me. People had come to me. He came to me about producing this movie. He'd originally written a comedy. He's an excellent writer. And my son was going to direct it at that point. And anyway, we couldn't bring the budget down in the comedy. And kind of out of frustration, Blake wrote this as a much littler movie, Billy Boy. For many, many years, people had asked me to produce, because as a casting director, sometimes people move into production.
Yeah.
Into producing. And I'd always been scared of it. And I'd also never really found something that I wanted to do. And even though I would have done anything for Blake, I also was just immediately drawn to the project and the rawness of it and the authenticity. It seemed very real. So that's when I committed, and that was a huge commitment. And during the course of us doing Billy Boy, which took years, I became friends with Blake's brother, and we formed a production company, Stay Relevant Productions.
Okay.
And so Billy Boy was our first feature, and since we have another feature that just sold, it's going to be on Showtime, called Mail Order Monster. Completely, Billy Boy is a dark movie for anybody out there that goes to watch it. The way that I was able to get involved in Billy Boy from a, I don't want to say moral standpoint, but from a standpoint of believing in it, was that I always looked at it as a cautionary tale because it's very violent. And as a parent, I look at it as a movie all about young people making choices. Now choices have consequences, and about the disenfranchisement of family and how the youth needs direction, all that kind of thing. My next movie, Mail Order Monster, is a family movie. And then I'm a producer in another movie that's right now. We just entered into a couple of festivals called Foster Boy. So I'm doing that as well as casting.
So is producing...
Long-winded answer,
Well,
sorry.
no, not at all. And that's the beauty of this format is, we're going to have a conversation for an hour.
Yeah.
Long-winded is
Yeah.
perfect. Is producing something that you're looking to do more and more of? Because it seems like
yes,
you're good at it.
Yeah, I am good at it, actually. I realized that I knew nothing when I started Billy Boy. I knew nothing. And I knew the casting part of it, but I learned, and luckily, in the time that I took to do it, I didn't make very many mistakes that were big mistakes. Mm-hmm. So I was fortunate but I do really love it. It has been exhausting, and like I said, Billy Boy, we had our premiere a couple weeks ago, which was amazing, and all kinds of Glee cast members, from Darren Criss to Cord to John Stamos. So many people came to support it. It was really a wonderful premiere. And now it's out. Then it was in the movies in theaters for a week. Now it's on VOD. For anybody out there, please check it out and rent it or buy it. But
I highly recommend it. It was a really well told story, and I'm super curious to actually read the original script.
Oh, it's so different.
Because and I could tell because the editing is nonlinear.
Well, what happened with that?
To a certain extent.
Oh, very nonlinear.
Yeah.
What happened is the movie was submitted. We had excellent representation as far as sales agents, and so we were submitted to all the best festivals. We had somebody at Annapurna Pictures that was very behind it, and so we had a lot of fans. And we were always told that the movie would get down to getting into a festival to the end, and then the reason that it didn't was always that it's a story that we've seen a million times, but it's not told in any kind of an interesting fashion. So very far along, we'd submitted to lots of festivals. We were in the Miami Film Festival, and Brad just decided to reimagine it. He locked himself away.
He's the editor as
well. He's the director and the editor.
Yeah.
He's a genius. And he locked himself away, and he started from scratch. And in 6 weeks, 10 hours a day, he recut the movie. And now it is really not in a linear fashion at all.
Yeah.
But it's more now, instead of it, what it was always kind of an elevated biopic. Now it's a movie about something, and it's about grief, and it's about being inside a young boy's mind, and you can actually interpret it many ways, which I like. Yes, so it would be interesting for you to read and as a result, he also cut 20 minutes out. We basically took the adults pretty much out of the movie, who originally played a much larger role.
The mother and
stepfather. The mother
and...
only had one scene taken away, and the stepfather one scene, but the teachers were
okay.
Greg German and Jim Beaver, who are incredible
Love
actors.
Jim Beaver.
I do too. He's one of my dearest friends, actually.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. One of my very, very best friends. The movie just became more about living in Billy's mind than it originally had been.
And I think it really captured that.
And I think it did.
And the editing style even contributed to that quite a bit.
And it is a polarizing movie. Even originally, when it was a linear movie and originally with voiceover, it was a movie that I knew people would love or hate. But what I wanted it to always be was real. Mm-hmm. Because I thought the only way that, especially if young people see it, that they're going to realize that if you get beaten up, it hurts. If you're dealing with guns, they hurt. So I wanted it to seem very real, and I think we succeeded at that.
How, as a producer, did you ensure that it felt real?
Felt real?
Yeah.
Well, I was always the one, and again, I'm not into violent movies, but I always wanted lots of blood, but everybody wanted it real. Everybody wanted it. I think partly was the casting, and I don't take full credit for that, because obviously Brad Beaker and Blake played a large role. Mm-hmm. huge role in the decision of the casting. But I think we had a very real cast, and I think Brad's an incredible director. And I just think that even when we were auditioning, the auditions were awesome, because in comparison to most television auditions, we had mix and matches where for 6 hours one day, 4 different boys would play 4 different roles, and we put them together. And one of the guys, Brandon Jones, who was up for Laurel and Mikey, he was pounding a chair in my office, and when he came back to the final callbacks, he was in the cast. He'd broken his hand and never told anybody. So people took it very seriously. Grant Harvey nearly choked Blake to death in an audition, but people were just all in from the beginning. It was a passion project. Nobody was working for either no money or little money. It was just one of those things where there was, even though it was such dark material, it was a joyous process, because people were very committed and devoted and wanted to be there and felt grateful and loved each other. It was by far one of the best experiences of my life, and right up there with Glee and the Glee Project for the best professional experience I've ever had in the business.
That's awesome. And I think it's the way you talk about it, and the experiences that I've had making films and acting and in all the different things that I've done. It's when everybody is so entrenched in it and
Absolutely.
Really cares, and when people go that extra bit that makes all of the other stuff worth it.
Absolutely. That says it all. Yeah.
So I want to step back a little bit and go back to the beginning. The story of where you came from. Where do you come from, and how did you get here?
I'll try to really make this short. I always wanted to be an actor. I went to college, but I thought it was unrealistic.
So a small town
in Modesto, California.
Modesto. Okay.
I always wanted to be in the business from the time I was a little kid. I was writing screenplays and shooting movies in high school, and I kind of look back on my situation without regret, but I wish that I had focused on directing or editing, 2 things that I loved, instead of acting, because I didn't really have what it was cut out to be an actor. Because,
what do you mean?
Well, I think you have to have much more. I mean, I'm not saying I had talent, because I probably didn't have much of that either, but I certainly didn't have the confidence. Acting is so hard. I have the utmost respect for actors, because you are putting yourself on the line. All the confidence I have in casting and producing, I had none of it in acting. But anyway, so I went to college, tried to change, was going to be a pre-dental major, ended up working on a movie, a Burt Reynolds movie.
Cool.
Was supposed to be a couple days, turned it to 6 weeks. I missed my last 6 weeks of college.
You missed your last 6 weeks of college?
Yeah, I graduated with a blank diploma and had to go to summer school. And anyway, eventually went back to school. But that did make me decide I wanted to be an actor. So cut through it all. I eventually went back to school, got my master's in English, because I always wanted something to fall back on. But I had an emphasis on film and theater. I directed Cat on a Hot Tin Roof for my master's thesis and wrote a thesis on it too. Moved to New York to be an actor. I had met my wife before I moved to New York, and we dated bi-coastally. Anyway, I got married, tried to be an actor in New York. My wife became a successful actress, started out as a model, became an actress. And at some point, I felt I was kind of living vicariously through her. I mean, I was doing everything for her, which was awesome. But I just was hitting an age where I realized I wanted to be successful. And I realized that to be an actor, you have to want to do that more than anything in the world. So with my wife, thank God, advising me and helping me to make the break, I did, and I became a stage manager, which was the worst job in the world for me, but I have the utmost respect for stage managers, because when the thing's over and all the actors are getting ready to go out and have fun and party, you're stuck cleaning up the theater. And
did you have respect for the stage manager beforehand?
No, I didn't. I realized I was one of those actors that never did anything to help anybody or, in plays. But I certainly did once I became a stage manager.
When you learned the things that they have to go through.
Crazy. And so my wife then was under contract to NBC. We moved to LA. I decided, I'm trying to make this not boring. I decided to, I went out to dinner with her and her manager and his wife, Pam Dixon. And Pam said there was a job opening as an associate. And I said to Kim that night, do you think I could go in? She goes, yeah, give it a shot. So Pam hired me, and within minutes knew that I was not qualified. and said I could be an assistant if I wanted. She brought in a qualified associate. Anyway, I worked on that miniseries. Then I, for a minute, went and tried to be a publicist. And then Pam again hooked me up with somebody who worked for Reuben Cannon and Associates. And Reuben, I met him, and he hired me. And that was where it all began. So I owe so much to Pam. She's been a wonderful supporter of mine, helped my son get into his college when he went to Chapman. She's an amazing person.
So the idea of having a mentor of sorts.
Well, she was my mentor then, and then my mentor became Reuben.
Okay.
Reuben and his associate, Carol Dudley. I worked for them, and with Reuben, he either trusted you completely or you couldn't even answer the phone. And he, for whatever reason, trusted me. And Reuben was the first thing that he had just done The Color Purple. And he was kind of the premier African-American casting director in the business. Again, the most incredible man who I've remained very close to all these years. And Carol, too, remained close to, also incredible. And I worked for him. And my first job was doing the voice casting for Roger Rabbit. And I would show up at Amblin, and I knew nothing. And somehow I did that. I don't know how I ever did that. And shortly after that, Eric Dawson, who had worked in a casting office in Nebraska, moved to work for Reuben as his assistant. And I was Reuben's associate. And Eric and I worked together and became immediate best friends. And casting was so flipping hard that after not very long, Eric quit and wanted to, was thinking of moving home and whatever. And when I got my first casting job, still as Reuben's associate, but that I would really be casting, it was a situation comedy called Family Man. I was just dying. And I called Eric and I said, I'll pay out of my pocket if you come back and work with me. He did, obviously.
Because there was just too much work to do.
It was so much work. Yeah. He obviously became an associate there. And then during that time period, Carol Kritzer interviewed for my intern. And I said, unpaid intern position. And I said, I was just like, I'm so busy. And she got home that day and she called me back and said, Robert, was I dressed appropriately? And I said, Carol, if you could breathe, you have the job. So she got she checked out to see if I had a wedding ring on, which I did. And she got the job. And she was, my intern, our assistant, our associate. Well, she was our intern and assistant at Reuben Cannon's. And then Eric and I broke off, and Eric and I brought Carol back as our assistant. We broke off amicably with Reuben, and Carol Kritzer came on as Eric and my assistant when we were first starting out as Ulrich Dawson Casting. And she then became our associate and our partner, so we eventually became Ulrich Dawson Kritzer partners. And again, a long story, but it was a lot to get there. So.
Well, no, I mean, that actually covers the next point that I wanted to talk about was Ulrich Dawson Kritzer.
Yeah, that's how we started.
How you all came together. Are there any benefits working as a team, especially a team that's been together for so long, that the individual casting directors don't get that you guys
I think
have?
that there are. I mean, it's been incredible for us. We are very close friends. We've operated all this time. We had no contract. We finally signed something when we unionized, but that's how much we trust each other. We've been in all of each other's.
It's a rare story here in Hollywood.
Weddings and births and, of our children and funerals. I mean, we're close friends.
Yeah.
And when it was just Eric and I, he used to always say, we never went to bed angry. It's like we were always able to work out whatever differences we had, and have still continued to do that. I do think that there are negatives, but they have never affected us. I do think that sometimes, especially in the beginning, when sometimes three of us, usually two of us, would go on an audition together or an interview together, people were confused. And I think that probably didn't help us at the beginning because they're like, who are they going to get to do the job? Who's really going to do the job? But where you really benefit is because there's three of us, and now there's also Liz Dean and Sean Dawson, Alex Newman, and so many more associates in the office. There's not an actor that comes to town that one of us haven't met. And if we're having a difficulty with a role, we walk into the other office and say who, So there's so much information coming into our office and so much knowledge built up between the three of us and now the many of us through the years that I think that what you get from us that you don't always get is a well-oiled machine. We have our own offices, often casting directors, and we used to do this, go from office to office, and there's always that time to set up and all that. And you come at us and boom, you're off and running.
Mm-hmm. So we'll jump into some of your projects now. One of your early projects that I grew up loving was Matlock.
Oh my God, that was one of our first, actually. You grew up late. You seem like you are way too young to have ever watched Matlock.
I'm 31, but I turned 50 when I was like 18.
Yeah, I get it.
I grew up in a small town called Berryville that everybody called Mayberryville.
Oh, how funny!
Because it feels like I grew up in the 50s.
Oh.
So I grew up watching Andy Griffith and things in black and white up until like the mid 90s. We didn't get the 90s until 2004.
That is hilarious.
So it was a Matlock. I loved. My grandfather loved Matlock. Loved Andy Griffith and playing the guitar and the dobro and all those things. But you started off as an associate on season 2 of that with Carol Dudley
and Ruben.
And Ruben. Then season 4, you came back as casting director. Eric Dawson had joined up the season before that.
Yeah.
Were there any hard-learned lessons from early on? Or were there any things that come out of that project?
We were so, I started with, it was, Viacom did Matlock, which we did. They did Jake and the Fat Man, which we did. Father Dowling, which we were really tied into Viacom. And we got the Viacom account from Ruben. That was one of the shows we took with us and still paid him for the show, a percentage. Dean Hargrove, Joel Steiger, and Jerry Sanoff were people that really helped us in our early career. We lucked out when we broke off, and it's kind of indirect in the fact that I love Matlock, and those shows were so well done, so well acted.
And they still hold up.
They hold up. Andy Griffith was incredible. My wife did 3 Jake and the Fat Mans, 2 Matlocks. But we also lucked out that when we first broke off from Ruben, there was a show called Erie, Indiana, which was a very classy show. Matlock was a well-established, but Erie was like this, and I, again, have the most respect for all the Viacom productions, but Erie was this kind of show that we as new casters wouldn't have normally gotten. But Laurie Openden, who was the casting director head of casting at NBC, believed in us and gave us that job. And now she's at the CW. And again, we had a lot of people helping us. So that job coupled with the Viacom shows, they were our stability, but that show helped us get other shows that we might not have gotten as young casting directors that were considered cooler. So I don't think there was a lot of stuff we really messed up because we were so diligent, and our life was, was casting it, especially in the beginning, but that I don't think there's much we messed up. I think that what I can say is that we were just given so many opportunities by wonderful people, and people liked us. And
what do you think contributed to that? Because that is a factor here in this
industry.
I
think starting out, we were really young. Eric was really young. He was, in his early 20s. I mean, he was young. And then I just think that we, how do you answer a question like that? Why we were good guys and we worked really hard, and neither of us or Carol, we've never taken for granted at least I've never taken for granted how lucky I've been. I just feel that I've been lucky to get the shows I've gotten. I've been lucky to have people entrust me, and then I've just worked hard. And that's just, I can say nobody works hard. And we've always been, my motto, and I'm sure this is theirs too, but I can say for me has always been that, well, it's our motto. We're never casting people say there's nobody else. We will always say we will keep looking.
Yeah.
We never say there's nobody else out there. Those words have never come out of my mouth. We strive to please and make the people we're working for happy and still keep the studio network happy. And that is a hard job. To me, being a casting director, one of the hardest jobs is putting out fires. You're continually putting out fires, working with different kinds of personalities, keeping egos in check, all that. So
a lot of juggling.
A lot of juggling.
And how much of that were you aware of early, or how much did you learn that quickly though?
I learned quickly, but I didn't know anything about casting.
Not at all.
I didn't know anything. I barely knew what a casting director was. I mean, I'd been an actor, but to show how oblivious I was, the same way I was oblivious to stage managers, I never really gave thought to what a casting director had to do, nor do I think a lot of people.
Most people don't.
Most people don't realize, first of all, how difficult a job it is as far as, you have to have this knowledge of the business, the contracts, that you have to have a certain amount of business knowledge, and that has never been my forte. That is my business partner Eric's forte. Or it's never been my favorite part of the business. My favorite part has been dealing with the actors and that part of it more than the negotiation. Like, I don't care anything about that. But that also made us a good team,
Sure, where a deficit on one is held up by the other. And that's we see that with other casting directors that we've talked to that have worked with partners or do work with partners. That generally seems to be the way that it goes, is one is really strong with the business side and the other is really strong with the actors.
And that's not, I cannot, Eric and Carol the three of us are equally, first of all, love actors. We're all married to one, we're all married to actors. Now Eric's wife is a director, but she was an actress for many, many years. And Carol's husband's a very talented actor, and my wife's a very talented actress. But they also are, Eric and Carol are very good. When Eric started, because he had been I think he was a dental major too, he would come to work and he would cut out articles from the TV Guide and put them in. Somebody didn't know, he would look up. He approached casting like he was approaching med school. Because neither Carol, the difference is, I did have the advantage of, I'd been an actor and grown up, everything about entertainment interested me. She was a psychology major, he was a pre-dental major. And so for me, there was a knowledge of actors that they learned that I just knew because I had read books about acting from the time I was a kid and then had become an actor
So
and a director.
You knew the struggles that actors were having to go through. They had to learn those aspects of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Carol went and audited acting classes to be, we all the three of us took it very seriously, is the point.
For as far as recommendations for things that people who are looking to be casting directors are doing, what sort of things do you recommend that somebody who is wanting to get into casting should be looking at doing?
That's a hard question because you're dealing with a business where everything is opinion, everything's subjective. And I always say that, the person teaching school, their opinion is as valid as the head of the network. It's just the head of the network's opinion is the one that might make the decision on but it's a business based on opinion. There's no right or wrong. It's not like somebody running a race and the fastest person wins. I always say you could get 10 professionals in the room and they could probably tear apart a Meryl Streep performance. Not me, but because I think there's just, it's all opinion on what people think is good and not good. However, it's also interesting that you can bring in hundreds of people, and generally, people will narrow it down to about the same 6 people.
Okay.
That is interesting. Now, there may be a couple of those 6 are polarizing, but people do kind of gravitate toward the same, which I always find fascinating. But I would just tell somebody starting out, I guess, to learn about the business. If you are going to be, I wasn't around during the silent movies, but I was just at movies, so I read about silent movies. I think you should read as much as you can about film, about directors, about actors. I think you should watch, especially if you're going to be a television cast director, you should watch as much television as possible. You should watch as many movies
as broad a spectrum as possible.
As broad a spectrum, and with movies, I think you should watch the best movies, what are considered the best movies, to the worst movies. I think that you should learn about the business you're going to enter into. And then, you should probably in this day and age have good computer skills and all those things, which I wouldn't survive if it wasn't for my staff. But, I do think that, a general knowledge of business does help because, it's funny, where people negotiating contracts and everything without being lawyers. Obviously, when it gets to a certain point, it's all done with business affairs and attorneys. But there's a little bit more, as I mentioned earlier, business involved in it than just the fun part.
So the next project that I want to talk about is one that's currently running, American Horror Story.
American Horror Story is Eric's show, Eric Dawson, my partner's.
Okay.
And the way that we work is, again, we're all involved in how do you say it? If somebody comes with an
You all
idea or
weigh
whatever,
in
we weigh in.
on-
But that is Eric's show.
Okay.
Eric started with Ryan Murphy.
Yeah.
He did Popular and Nip Tuck.
Mm-hmm.
I did one Popular. Eric was out of town. I did the one that Bryce Johnson was cast on, so I'm very proud of that, and Bryce has remained a friend. But that that was Eric's contact 100%. I did not. I mean, I barely knew Ryan. I went to one Nip Tuck session.
Okay.
When Glee came along, Eric was going to do Glee,
Mm-hmm. and
asked me, because I come from a musical background, if I was interested in doing it with him. And then after a few weeks, Eric realized it wasn't his, or month or whatever, realized it wasn't his thing.
Yeah.
But he has the Ryan Murphy connection. Now, during Glee, I became very close to Ryan, and I absolutely feel that I had done, Battlestar Galactica, which I'm extremely proud of with Eric, because we shared. I'd done Dark Angel with James Cameron not that long after Titanic, and I remember reading in the trades, because I love Titanic, and I remember reading, I wish I could get this project, and 2 seconds later the phone rang, and Charles Egley, somebody that I had worked with, set up a meeting, and I got that. So I had done things I was extremely proud of, in my career, but Glee definitely changed my life, and that is 100% I owe to Ryan, and working with Ryan, which was just wonderful, because the way Ryan works, it's kind of like Ruben. If he trusts you, he trusts you. And with Glee, I felt so in sync with how I knew what he wanted, and so it made the casting so easy and so fun, because I knew in 99% of the cases who Ryan would choose. I'd position him first, but that isn't why he chose him. He chose him because I knew that, because I knew what he wanted. And what the great thing about Ryan, as a producer and a talent, and obviously he's genius, is that Ryan, there was never anybody that was too outside it was too outside the box. Ryan, anything would go, he was open to anything. And even though he was always very clear in what he wanted, if he wanted an apple, I would give him 5 apples. But then if I gave him an orange, he would be open to that, And
how often do you get that?
Never. And never somebody like, I think Ryan was so, now the world, thank goodness, is so much more into being aware of how important diversity is in casting. Ryan always was. And just in the disabled community alone, the amount of disabled people that Ryan cast on Glee alone was remarkable. And he would never write down to them. It was always, the character Becky Jackson was a Down syndrome girl, and she was sweet, and she was mean, and she was funny, and she was nasty, and she was
a three-dimensional character,
a real person.
Yeah.
And that was, so I think pretty much unheard of to that point. I'm one of those people that I'm so proud of Glee, and I think that Glee really helped change the world. I really do. I know that sounds corny, but...
In what sense?
Well, I just think it made people more aware that it's okay to be different. Glee was all about being different. And I think that, and not being ashamed of being different, but being, celebrating being different.
Yeah.
And when I was eventually in a show called The Glee Project, which was, again, the biggest gift Ryan could have given to me. It was so wonderful. And even before that, though, when I was first casting Glee, because the Glee Project gave me obviously more visibility because I was on television, even before that, I would get emails from young kids who were contemplating suicide. And it was a very, and I would address it and turn them over to people in the Trevor Project. I did, but it was, it made people feel it was okay to reach out and to, I think it was really a wonderful show.
That's, are there any particular instances, and I don't mean to put you on the spot about that, but any particular instances that stood out to you about the Glee Project and all of these people's whose lives you really did touch?
Well, it just made me, again, feel extremely grateful, the Glee Project was great because it was really, other than I was dealing with this mass volume, exactly like I did Glee. You know, I mean, it was
interesting. It just had a bunch of cameras
it just
and
had a bunch of
lighting
cameras
and a stage.
And then as far as casting the people in the were contenders in the project.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was on the show with Nikki Anders and Zach Woodley, who are again both just incredible, and I was able to see what they would do on a daily basis with the actual scripted show of Glee. But I always said with the Glee Project is that, you know, my wife, I used to come home on the elimination days and I'd be so sad. And she said, Robert, it is a competition show. Somebody has to go home. I'd be devastated. And
does that happen with casting as well?
No, that's what I was going to say. What I realized is on the Glee Project, in general casting, I can probably count on two hands when I've been able to see somebody lose a job or see somebody get a job, you know, to really share in the sadness and the joy.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Glee Project, I was, you know, 5 feet from them and their crying faces. And it was just, you know, the first season, I would have to go in as soon as they were eliminated and comfort them. They never aired any of that. It was just like, oh my gosh, this is killing me. But it was also the wonderful part because it was suddenly a process that I'd been involved in for years, and I saw the intimacy of it. I was intimate with it.
So that changed.
Well,
has
it just
changed
made it
any
even
of the
more.
way?
It made me even more, you know, even love actors even more and more sympathetic to how hard it is.
Yeah.
And obviously, on the Glee Project, they were, you know, they were locked away in captivity, like, you know, and didn't have a phone, and were, you know, it was very torturous. But they were also, you know, they were really working hard, you know, week to week. So
yeah. I mean, I do want to talk a little bit about the idea of competition casting. And were there folks that didn't end up winning that you're like, I'm going to keep that, I've got that guy's number? We're calling
all of them.
All of them.
I mean, I really remained, I mean, my life is pretty crazy. I mean, my home is open. My parents were the same way. You know, my home was the home that kids were at or lived at for weeks at a time. My wife and I we have two kids who are, like I said, Cooper, I'm so proud of right now. In fact, to change the subject for a sec, I was the Soho House. I'd never been to their screening at the Soho House in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And last month I was there 3 times in a week and a half. Once my son shot something which was incredible that was there in the screening room. That same week, Blake is in American Animals, which is, he's genius. He's so good. And I don't use the word genius too much, and that's bad to overuse that word, but he's really great in American Animals. And then the next week we had our Billy Boy screening there, so it was so fun. But that was Cooper. I was so proud of him that he did something there. And then my daughter, Tierney, is going to college in a month, and that's devastating. But like I was raised, my home was open. So Hannah from the Glee Project lived in our house for a while, I believe. Alex Newell from the Glee Project lived in our guest house for a while. Blake lived with us a few times, or stayed with us several times. I have remained very good friends with them all. Blake is like a son. Abraham Lim is so close, and, you know, after the Glee Project, worked here basically for free for months.
In the office
in
here?
the office, yeah. So everyone, you know, I'm very close to Abraham. I mean, all of them. I'm sure I'm going to leave somebody out that I'm so close to, and I'm so proud of Alex Newell, who's on Broadway now in Once in this Island, and I'm so proud of Ali Stroker, who was, I do think, part of her becoming well known was the Glee Project, and she was the first person ever in a wheelchair on Broadway, which is a pretty cool thing. Yeah,
that's amazing.
But I'm now looking, because I'm close to Eileen, I'm close to Samuel, Damien just got engaged, and my wife and I are going to dinner with him this week. Samuel wrote me this week. Lily just booked a big show, and I'm very proud of her. I mean, you know, they're all. I mean, Lindsay was from Modesto and was just an extraordinary talent. My wife and I had judged her in a project called Valley's Got Talent in Modesto. Bryce, I'd known since he was a young kid, because my wife was on a show with his mom. Anyway, so I was close.
So have you with this show in particular, have you been closer with this cast and these people from Glee Project and Glee
than anyone?
than any other
of
project?
course, because none of the other, the other people go off and do their shows. You never see them. Yeah, no,
Sure.
oh, for sure. I mean, I'm not really close to any of the.
What do you think contributes to that?
Well, the casting. I mean, I think that's always the case with casting, but in particular when casting isn't on the same lot.
Oh, sure.
So I mean, I was close-ish to people on Glee, just because. I mean, Darren Criss being one who I just love. He came to the Billy Boy premiere, but I was, there were people on Glee definitely, from Cord and Corey and many, that I have had, friendships with, but that was really the first. And I think that's only because there were so many Glee parties, and normally people go off and do a show and you never see them again. So Glee was unusual in that there were more people that I at least saw on a social level, and also because Glee was up for so much. I'd see them at the SAG Awards, I'd see them at the Golden Globe thing,
So partially because of its success,
the success
and
of it and the
it was
intimacy, and it was in Los
yeah.
Angeles and all that.
Yeah.
But the Glee Project was different. I saw the Glee Project shot 5 days a week, which is unusual. A lot of reality shows only shoot 2 days a week, but because of the when somebody would get in the bottom three, then they would have to orchestrate music in their key and all that, shoot the music video, get the music video edited. So it was 5 days. I worked 4 of those 5 days, so I was around these kids, most of that 11-week process.
Okay, so
it was
just
unusual.
Proximity and all those things kind of.
And then when the Glee Project started airing the second season, my wife and I would have parties and have all of them that lived in LA over to watch it.
Okay.
And plus 50 other people, so that was fun.
It seems like a really interesting project to have been part of, and just the whole Glee phenomenon that happened.
It was incredible. And the Glee Project, was really a success. It's just, unfortunately, it was around the time when Corey Monteith passed away, and that was that was the end of the Glee Project, and that was basically the final season of Glee. Yeah. That was just one of the saddest things ever, and I want to talk about, but the Glee Project was a amazing thing.
Yeah. Well, another project I want to talk about, and correct me if this is one of your partners' lead on the project, was Supernatural.
No, that's mine.
That's yours.
That's my show. Yeah.
So that show's been going for
14 seasons.
14 seasons, 13 years now, forever.
Yeah.
It has got a rabid fan following.
It does. I'm very proud of it, too.
It's a really fun show. I started watching it a couple years back. Maria actually introduced me to it.
Oh, yeah, it's great. My
and
son's
it's a blast.
obsessed with it. Yeah.
It's a lot of fun, and they're nearing their end.
Well, who knows?
Sure, yeah. Well,
it's a huge success.
They had said at one point a couple years back that they were going to be like next season's going to be the last season, and they keep doing that. And I think they're going to keep going. I hope they do.
Yeah.
They had the Scooby-Doo episode this season, which I
amazing.
loved. Can you take me through the process of casting an episode of Supernatural?
Yes. Okay, Supernatural, unlike Glee, is a show that shoots out of town.
Yeah.
So it's very different. I mean, the Glee was very different too, because in Glee, I had I was never in a room with a director. I do want to give a shout out to, I said Brad Beaker, who did such an incredible job on Billy Boy, but he also was a director on Glee, and he is an American Horror, and the way we became friends was every time there was this amazing episode of Glee, the first time I wrote him was when Darren Criss's first episode aired.
Did he direct that episode?
He directed it. And then the next episode I thought was incredible. I loved Glee. I thought they were all incredible. But the next one, and it turned out that he had directed.
But you took recognition of the direction.
And that same thing happened on American Horror, which led to us offering, and plus he was close to Blake, us offering him Billy Boy. But Glee was unusual in the fact that in those days you would usually have it. Now you never do. You usually have a director in the room. Because Ryan was so involved, it was just me putting people on tape, saying it to Ryan, and that was pretty much it. People could kind of weigh in, but Ryan really was the voice. Supernatural, because it's an out-of-town show, I never have a director in the room, unless the director happens to be one of the executive producers. I got the show initially, Eric Kripke, who I'm now doing The Boys with, which is the show to really look out. Oh my gosh, incredible. I'm trying to think of other words other than incredible, amazing, genius. I sound like Donald Trump, but I'm trying to think of other words. I'm compensating for my voice because my flippant voice, so my brain isn't working. But Eric Kripke has been a loyal supporter of mine for years, and he started, and then Robert Singer, who I knew eventually got involved, and now Andrew Dabb. We have a lot of people that I've known and are friends with. Supernatural works that we do, unlike a lot of shows which we just do from our office, we actually go to the offices of Supernatural.
Okay.
And we do the auditions live. Then we send off the tapes. Mm-hmm. We work with incredible casting directors incredible again. We work with super talented casting directors in Canada, and they do such a bulk of the show, obviously. It's such a large part of the show. But it's a pretty simple process, you know.
I mean, for instance,
my wife was on that show too. Three episodes of Supernatural. She played Jim's love interest, Jim Beavers.
Oh, right on. So, I mean, I guess with each episode, more or less, and you know, we don't have to get super into the weeds on this, but how many guest stars are you looking for?
Well, it depends.
Yeah.
It absolutely depends. Through the years, we have done a lot of recurring guest stars.
Yeah.
So many so that as it's gone along, there aren't as many new people, although last season there were a lot of new characters. We might look for 2 to 3 to 4, very rarely 5, characters for an episode, 2 to 3 to 4 usually. And they all may come from here or none may come from here. Because then they always take financial into consideration and who's in Canada, and Canada has a lot of talent, and it varies who comes from here, you know, in all honesty. And I didn't do the pilot of Supernatural. I did every episode starting with the first episode. Patrick Rush did the pilot. He went off to do an executive job somewhere. I took over the show.
So when you take over for something like that, what sort of things are you... Because you're handed, all right, these are the stars of the show. Yeah. What do you first do to square people around that cast who already exists? Well,
I mean, initially, it kind of just becomes what it becomes. Initially, in that case, the first episode was just several guest stars. So I, in Supernatural, in the first episode, I happened to cast Alden Ehrenreich, who now has had such success.
He's doing all right.
He's doing pretty good. I really not fought for him, but I knew that he would. The concern was because he'd never done anything, as I remember, would he be able to hit marks and everything? I'm like, yes. In my old age, I've cast a lot of people on their first jobs or their early on jobs. But so it was just casting people that weren't in the fabric of the story of the show. And that just kind of, and also the show changed a lot. The first year it basically concentrated on urban legend.
Yeah, it was Monster of the Week.
It was yeah.
We're going to deal with the Wendigo.
It's they've done such a good job of being able to keep the show alive, interesting, different, all these many years. So much of the success of the show are Jared and Jensen. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because, again, I didn't do the pilot. I had Jensen in Dark Angel. He did the second season of Dark Angel. And he had tested for another pilot that I'd done that I was very proud of, and that Robert Singer had directed, who was on Supernatural. So I knew Jensen a little. Jared, other than maybe meeting once or twice, I don't even know, but we've kind of become not friends, but I feel very comfortable with them, both of them. And they're such good guys. And when I was raising money for Billy Boy, we did a concert in my hometown, Modesto, at the Gallo Arts Center. And we had past winners of Valley's Got Talent, the thing that Lindsay Pierce had won, and people from Glee and the Glee Project perform, and that was one of our fundraisers. We also did a Kickstarter, but that was one of our fundraisers. And I did a celebrity tape of my friends, and Jared and Jensen were so kind to do a very funny bit in this little video that we did.
Mm-hmm. Well, with shows like Supernatural, and I know you guys have done CSI for a really long time.
My business Carol did that. I did one episode of that.
You did? Well, what's interesting to me is like some of these shows, Supernatural, CSI being another one, Glee being another, long-running shows that have because they're procedural in nature.
Yes.
You have a new group of guest stars that come through
Yes.
very often, so you guys see.
Oh.
If they're acting in this town, you guys have probably seen them.
That I do think that there are those people that come in that are going to be stars. I mean, you do, and
is that just a gut feeling?
it's a gut feeling because again, it's all opinion.
Yeah.
One of my early on, I cast Jack Black. I knew he was.
You did in Airborne.
In Airborne,
I
yes.
love that movie.
I used to bring. I love that movie.
I
And used to
love
bring
that
him in
movie.
all the time. Yeah, I did. Me too.
Seth Green.
Seth.
That-
I mean, I knew both, and Seth, and I also did a show called The Birds of Paradise, which was awesome. I went to Hawaii for 3.5
Alana
weeks.
Uba. Is that how we pronounce
Yeah,
her name?
Alana Eubank.
Alana Eubank.
Yeah. But I think I gave. It's funny. I think I gave Ryan Felipe either his SAG card or one of his first jobs, and now we're doing Shooter with him this many years later. Jessica Alba I'd cast as a little girl, and then again on Dark Angel when she was so young.
Because that was her first
what was her
major
first big
lead.
thing? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And Jessica, I knew, not only was she beautiful, but there was something very special, about her. On a different, Bryan Cranston, Eric Carroll and I used to talk about, because he did many shows. He played opposite my wife in Matlock.
Yeah. He had been around forever.
He'd been around forever, and
a guest star on pretty much every show that existed.
And he was one of those actors that, and he wasn't a kid that you go, that kid is going to be, but he was one of those actors that you knew was so extraordinarily talented and versatile that if you brought him in, he could do anything. And there are those actors that I bet 5 or 10 that Carol and I could agree on through the years that may not have become stars like Bryan, but that have that versatility and that you can count on. But when Bryan began to hit his success, it was no major surprise because he was so flipping good, and wonderful. And again, just an incredible person. I asked him to go to a soldier care event that I'm involved in, and my son and I are involved. And he said, "Robert, I can't go, but they can all come by and watch me shoot my movie that he was doing at the time." And he spent so much time with them. I mean, he's that kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
He has not changed one bit. But there's been those people that I also know would make it, like Jeremy Renner's from my hometown. I knew him when he was super young. I knew he would, become something.
Yeah.
I knew Chris Colfer was extraordinarily special. Blake, for sure, I think is not only so talented, but it's the versatility with the singing and the writing and all that he can do would be one of those people in that category. But there's a young actor, Graham Rogers. There's Grant Harvey, who's in Billy Boy, who is just now, I can't even say what he just got, but I think that he is one of the best actors out there as well. There's a lot.
Yeah. Well, we're dangerously near an hour, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know you said you've got a project right now called The Boys. That is directed by Dan Trachtenberg, who I love.
Amazing.
Dan Trachtenberg, amazing director and a wonderful human being. Created by
Eric
Kripke. Evan Goldberg
and Seth Rogen.
And Seth are a part of it. It's based off of a comic book.
Yes.
It's really exciting to be a part of. Yeah.
The most exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't been this excited about a project other than projects I produced since Glee. No,
what is it that's so exciting about it?
Well, it's first of all so well written. I love working with Eric Kripke. I feel blessed to have gotten the job, and that is the truth. When you work with, at this point in my career, it's really about who you work with, because life is so short. Let me knock on wood. I don't know what around, but I better knock. But it is so short, and you want the experience to be the people you believe in and you love, and and you feel comfortable with. And I do with Eric Kripke. And then to get on top of it, the opportunity to work on something that is so high quality, it is, as much as I love movies and love I don't really like reading scripts. I find it, and like I said, I got my master's in English. I read a lot of books. I just don't. It's not my favorite thing. I cannot put the Boys is a page turner. I think it's so well written. The characters are so fun.
When a script is like that,
I think people are going to really like it. And,
awesome.
And I'm very proud of the cast. And the cast is a very cool cast. It's and I hadn't worked at Amazon before. And
so this is an Amazon project.
It's a Sony Amazon project.
Very cool.
All the people I'm working with at both places are just, tremendous. And again, that's true. Like if you work with studio people, Sharon Klein at 20th is one of my closest friends, so it makes working there fun. If I work with Grace Wood, NBC, or IO, at ABC, it's fun. And at this point, I want it to be fun.
You might as well make it fun at this point. Well, is there anything else that you want to talk about?
No, I think I've talked entirely too much.
Well,
I think I guess the parent advice for actors would just be that I know how hard it is. We ask you, especially in television, to come into a room, to wait in a room with 20 people and come in a room and you know that people want you just to do it and get out. And we're asking you to open your souls and to be so vulnerable. And I think it's just that the thing you hear over and over and over, that everyone wants you to be good, because even from a selfish standpoint, it just makes our job easier. We want people to succeed. We want them to be good. And it has been our goal as an office, Eric, Carol, myself, to absolutely make our casting office as friendly to actors as possible. And I think we've succeeded. And where you said, one thing I do want to say, you said that, we do a lot of in-town shows. We're going to be doing The Rookie, and we did CSI. We did these in-town shows that have high volume casting where you're seeing, thousands of actors. And we feel that we're so open and see so many people. And yet, I know, because I have friends who are actors, there are people that still feel they can't get in here. And that must be very frustrating. And I don't really know how to solve that, because the issue is there's just so many actors. But I know that all three of us make it a point of seeing new people, welcoming people, and then treating them as kindly as possible during the process. So for an actor, back to my long-winded answer, is that I think that it's all about you just trying to believe in yourself and be as prepared as possible, but then also don't beat yourself up after the audition. When you're gone, try to, as much as possible, release it and know that you did the best you could do.
I think that's great advice. Release it and know you did the best you can. That is great advice. Thank you so much, Robert. I look forward to the next chat. Do not forget to like, comment, subscribe, love, heart, thumbs up, and share the show. Tune in next week when we chat with Jessica Sherman, casting director on shows like The Strain and Bates Motel, and the movie Slight.
And I'm still very confused and unsure of what they're talking about. And lo and behold, 15 minutes later, Steven Spielberg comes walking into the room. And then I learned what I was working on, that it was Super 8 and that he was producing and JJ was directing. And it was, and that was a crazy experience, because typically you cast a movie in 12 weeks. We were on that movie for 9 months, just casting the kids.
Placing Faces is powered by Collaborator.com, a media production service connecting media professionals to companies, brands, and agencies, allowing you to scale your production based on your needs. Video professionals find work, and companies save money. We'd also like to thank you guys over at Casting Society of America for helping introduce us to so many of these wonderful guests. They also serve as a hub of information about this branch of the film industry. So if you want to learn more about the society and what it takes to get into casting, you can visit castingsociety.com. Thanks for listening. Tune in next week, and be well.